Okay, well, it is now 12 noon, everybody. I wanted to welcome you to today's program. My name is John Haber. I'm the Field Services Director for the California Preservation Foundation. For those of you who don't know the California Preservation Foundation, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting and celebrating the depth and diversity of California's historic places. Our programs are made possible through the generous support of our members, donors, and of course, our annual sponsors, including our lead education sponsor, WJE. If you'd like to become a part of our statewide preservation community, we invite you to join us at californiapreservation.org/join, where you'll find our membership programs. Also wanted to acknowledge the generosity that allows us to offer programs like this at no cost, and wanted to call attention to those of you here today who chose to donate as part of your registration to this free program. If you'd like to make a special end of year gift, you can do so at californiapreservation.org/give. And while you're supporting CPF, we also invite you to visit our annual preservation auction. This once in a year event, it features unique experiences and rare items. You can find our annual auction at californiapreservation.org/bid. And among the items offered today or until December 18th, uh, inc would include a copy of Palm Springs Tiki, which is being featured today as part of today's program. So we encourage you to go to californiapreservation.org/bid to look at the auction items that all support the California Preservation Foundation. Today's program, the second in our four-part series of Where Worlds Meet, explores how global ideas, cultures, and architectural traditions have shaped the built environment in California. Part two, today's program, Tiki and Mid-Century California Culture, will explore the evolution of Polynesian Pop and Tiki in California as an imaginative, highly visual, and distinctly mid-century cultural phenomenon. Our moderator today is architect, historian, and critic Alan Hess. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan Hess to introduce today's panelists. Welcome.
Thank you, John, and welcome to everybody who is online. This is going to be a really good hour talking about Tiki and all of its relevant things. The thing is that Tiki was, and still is in many ways kind of not seriously considered as architecture, that it's a marginal cultural event. But thanks to our two authors here, who are authors of this new book on Tiki in the Desert, is going to be a fascinating conversation. I want to introduce the two, and then we'll get along with our slideshow, where all three of us are going to be discussing the images and the ideas that Sven is going to be showing. First of all, Sven Kirsten, welcome, Sven. Sven is
Hi there.
he is an author, a photographer, and a historian, and it is important. He is really one of the prime leaders to bring back an interest and understanding the conversation about Tiki. Uh, Part of that is not only his activism, but also the five books that he has written, each one distinctive, must say, about Tiki, so that we have some real meat to deal with. Our other author is Peter Moruzzi. He has a long record in historic preservation here in Southern California. He helped to found the Palm Springs Modern Committee. And before that, he was the chair of the Los Angeles Conservancy's Modern Committee as well. This is back in a time when even modern architecture was not really that carefully researched and understood. So Peter has been a leader in recreating that. He has written six books on Havana architecture, Palm Springs, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and classic dining. So with that, I assure everybody these are experts. They know what they're talking about. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. So Sven, you have a slideshow. Do you want to
Yeah, I'm
with
going to
that?
start with the basics. But before, I just want to briefly mention you said that Tiki hasn't been taken seriously, and I was just at the Christmas lighting of the tram or a gas station that Peter was also instrumental with. And I was introduced to somebody, and I mentioned this slideshow and said, yeah, because Tiki hasn't been taken seriously so far. And the guy laughed out loud. Tiki, seriously. It was just like the classic reaction because people cannot understand that something can be fun and funny and serious at the same time. Maybe you
Exactly.
maybe you have to be German to do that.
Well, it was a little
So
inappropriate that you hit him after he said that, but other than that, it was great.
well, uh, no, it was just such a classic reaction. But so let's get to. I just wanted to start with a brief introduction of the basics for the people that come here and have never heard about Tiki style. So the groundwork for Tiki style was laid by a gentleman named Don Beach. He opened his beachcomber bar in 1934 in Hollywood and proceeded to create a cornucopia of exotic rum drinks that formed the basis of tiki bar cocktail menus for the next century. He also succeeded in building floor-to-ceiling bamboo interiors that allowed the working American to escape their mundane 9-to-5 world to a fictional South Seas paradise. So I made up this little evolution chart because I'm German, and Don the Beachcomber is here right at the top, and then below that are all the different people that he inspired. But what's also important is that he's really started out in the pre-Tiki period, and the Tiki period did not really start until the 1950s. Um, so the tiki style is defined by two signifiers, the use of the tiki figure, of course, the Polynesian idol, and architecturally by the modern primitive concept of the A-frame. And that's what today's uh, talk is going to be about. By the mid-1950s, tropical bars and restaurants began to use tiki figures as their icon. They were featured on menus and as interior decor. Here, tiki designs by Irvin Weisenberg for Army and Davis Architects, carved for the Kona Kai restaurant at the Marriott Hotel in Philadelphia. And here an example of exterior tikis by Milan Guanco for the Kapukai bowling alley in the LA suburb of Rancho Cucamonga. And it's just a great example of how baroque tikis were, got in the architecture of tiki style. They're not only bridge posts. They were guardian tikis to the entrance. And here on the door, we see 2D carvings of smiling tikis for the people that entered. On the inside of the door, for the people that were leaving, those tikis were frowning.
Sven, could
So
I ask you what exactly is a tiki? Is it a sacred object? Is it an
it's yeah,
architectural
tiki
object?
is it's both. What happened in Polynesian mythology, the demigod Tiki, who was sort of like the Polynesian Adam because he was regarded as the creator of mankind. Um, he was a demigod, and he created the first man, not man, but human being. And because of that, later on, all depictions of him were called tikis, and that's and in American tiki style. It's a really broad term that includes not only images from Polynesia, but also from the other oceanic art island groups. So a tiki is really a carving based on a mythological figure, the god Tiki.
Great.
So here we are. Oh, on a personal note, when I moved from Germany to LA in the 1980s, I was accustomed to architectural embellishments in the form of classical Greek and Roman statues from European cities, and I had never encountered so-called primitive carvings as architectural supports. I was fascinated by this whimsical concept and began to look for answers. So here's example of how tiki really became commercial. Uh, Before there was tiki, Hawaii had already been promoted as an island paradise during much of the early 20th century. But the popularity of Hawaii and Polynesia grew steadily after World War II. But the final push that brought the style into the mainstream was Hawaii becoming a state in 1951.
Nice.
Statehood.
59, yeah?
59, yes, sorry, not 51. There it says 59. For Americans, Hawaii was now in their own backyard. And since everybody was happy in Hawaii, people sought to recreate the lifestyle on the mainland as a form of permanent vacation. And so developers saw the money that could be made and by building Polynesian paradises for the middle class. And now it's where it gets interesting. I'm using the comparison of the Flintstones and the Jetsons. I hope enough people have that as a cultural reference still. The pursuit of a South Seas leisure life happened to coincide with the American automobiles taking off into space, as Detroit designers created cars inspired by rocket and jets. Modern architects were imbued by the same space age spirit, be it for churches or private home like Bruce Gough's Shin and Khan in 1956 and Ken Kellogg's Babcock House in 1957. And here I wanted to pause, Alan, because these architects are your specialty. And I just thought it was interesting how later in their work they became more organic with rounded shapes. But these early examples really are examples of that jagged A-frame look.
Yeah, it's a fascinating connection that these things are going on at the same time. And again, this is where we might think that they're just completely random, unrelated, and yet they're all happening at the same time. A
Right,
set of shapes, forms, and kind of the symbolism, which is in some way pointing to both the future, but also to a paradise. I think the tiki
right.
style definitely has that paradisical character to it. And why are these appealing in culture at
Yeah,
the
it's like the opposite ends of the aesthetic spectrum, jets and primitive huts at the same
yeah.
time.
Well, that's the whole thing about Fred Flintstone and George Jetson. They're the opposites,
Yeah,
the past and the far future they represent in popular culture.
yeah. So here's another great A-frame jetting A-frame example by self-taught architect Harry Gesner, who a lot of his homes were experiments with the A-frame, and this is a beautiful example, the 1961 Steeble House in Mandeville Canyon. The peak of the A-frame lasted from the mid-50s to the mid-60s, paralleling the peak of Tiki. Oops, one too fast here. The A-frame's best-known application was that of the vacation home, getting in reach of oh, the vacation home was getting in reach of the expanding middle class by the late 1950s. And that's what a lot of people know as the A-frame. But the A was also used to give churches a modern, progressive mantle. Fast food chains saw it as its potential as attention-grabbing roadside signage, and it also coincided with the popularity of the bowling alley boom, which our friend Chris Nichols just published a book about. It all happened in the late 50s, early 60s. The jetting out roofs were considered ultra modern, and I've myself been wondering, maybe you guys can talk about why the style has not been covered more in many books on mid-century modernism. Has it been marginalized as being too googie or something? You know, I just have this weakness for the A-frame, so I really wonder. One reason might be that the A-frame came in many different forms, like when it was not a straight A, but more akin to a folded plate roof, or a hyperbolic paraboloid like this 1962 built St. Edmund's Episcopal Church. Um, it, it's these buildings are always featured as hyperbolic paraboloids, but to me, they fit the spirit of the A-frame,
Well,
and that's when
they're
I
using.
get to your book.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, they're using modern technology to get this, extreme cantilever,
Right.
which gives it this, really stunning form. So in that way, they're modern. But what you're saying also is that they're a very traditional type of architecture as well.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, but right now I'm just I'm talking about hyperbolic paraboloids not being put into the same genre as A-frames, and to me they are because the spirit of this, upward and outward form is the same both in the A-frames and in the hyperbolic paraboloids. Um, the There's even examples that are almost more sculptural than anything. I mean, this doesn't look like a very practical roof, but it's to me, this is an A-frame, or where architects were just playing with the possibilities of the A shape, like these apartment buildings near Long Beach. It's like uh, they're just having fun with this abstract A-frame form. And now we get to the convergence of modern meets tribal, because at the same time modern architects fell in love with the A-frame concepts, the public fell in love with Tiki. And as it happened, many of the indigenous domiciles in the Pacific Islands were built with similar roof lines, like, for example, the saddleback roofs of the Caroline Islands were adapted for hotels like the Kon-Tiki in Phoenix, Arizona, the forward-leaning roofs of native villages in Melanesia could be found in the jutting entrances of the Kapukai bowling alley in Rancho Cucamonga. We saw the entrance here of that. That was the Kapukai, and it had like four separate A-frames for four separate entrances. Also, the soaring gables of men's meeting houses in Papua New Guinea, here on the left, were mirrored in the rec room at San Diego's Halamakai Apartments, or at the Dairy Queen at the Polynesian Plaza in Scottsdale, Arizona. For preservationists, this building has since been moved and been beautifully restored and made into a restaurant in Scottsdale. I can't think of the name for it right now, but it's really like Alan often quotes a building as a sign. Another great examples are the colorful storyboard paintings of men's houses in the Palau Islands, um, appeared on the gables of upscale eateries like Trader Vic's at the Plaza in New York. As a matter of
Sven,
fact, yeah.
can I ask, on those South Seas examples, how are they structured and why do they have this huge, A-frame? I mean, it seems like it would be a lot simpler to just do a flat roof of some sort.
Well, because
Um,
they're also a building as a sign. They want to attract attention, and they want to also identify themselves as a island restaurant, and people started to associate that with them. But the shape was pretty easy. There was a central beam, and that would go out even beyond the roof line, and that's a whole nother subject of Polynesian architecture is the so-called outrigger beam, which jutted out from these A-frames, but we don't have enough time to get into that. We're
there's so
still,
much.
I'm still talking about, just using Trader Vic as a great example. Uh, Trader Vic, who was initially inspired by Don the Beachcomber, but then really took off with his business, and the evolution of pre-Tiki to Tiki style, he's a great example because, whoops, the initial artwork for his franchises depicted frolicking natives and nude hula maidens throughout the 1940s and early 50s. And in the mid 1950s, he adapted a modern look of tikis and primitive art for his menu covers and marked the entrances to his restaurants with A-frames, like at the 1955 Beverly Hills Hilton Trader Vic's. This souvenir silk scarf shows how many of the Trader Vic's restaurants were built with A-frames. It's really, quite astonishing. I don't know if you can read this, but this is like Portland, Denver, Scottsdale. Um, this was Beverly Hills. This was New York. Uh, oh no, this was Scottsdale above there. And yeah, he really brought in the A-frame concept for Polynesian restaurants. Next, we're going to talk about how, to my mind, Tiki really became a genre when it left the restaurant and bar business and was used because there were other themed restaurants like Chinese and Italian restaurants that used the cultural, you know, items as their decor. But Tiki style went beyond that when it started to branch out to apartment buildings and motels and bowling alleys, and so to speak. Here's a great example of a still existing apartment buildings in the Granada Hills called the Kona Pali, and we can see the A-frame. But within the A-frame, there are some great carved tiki details. There is a waterfall. Um, t- these places started using all the same decor concepts that the restaurants began with. And the companies like Oceanic Arts that had outfitted these restaurants started getting these jobs for motels and apartment buildings, and they used the same concept. They got quite elaborate. Like this is an apartment complex under construction in West Covina. That it's like it took on like theme park dimensions. This is like a two-story high waterfall and tikis before all the plantings came in. And to show what that probably looked like later, here's an example of the Islander apartments in Gardena when they were built with the classical elements of anchor chain railing, the tiki, bamboo poles, fishnet floats, and next to it, we can see how the Gardena Islander apartments look now with all the nice foliage grown in, which was one of the assets of Southern California, that you could plant all these tropical plants, and they really were part of the whole concept. Oh yeah, this is again to demonstrate how the restaurant concepts were, used for apartments. This is the entrance to the Gardena Islander with a bridge over a waterfall moat and tiki carving posts with anchor chain railings. Another concept that was taken from restaurants were the flaming tiki torches. Here for the Polynesian village in Playa del Rey, built by Armand Davis, designed by Armand Davis, and they even went as far as having gas jets installed underwater of the center courtyard waterfall. I don't know how long that lasted, but it's quite impressive. And then the last apartment slide, my friend Kyra Geller just recently photographed. He got into the Kona Pali apartment courtyard, and there's a rec room that still has the original square bamboo, which is a rare bamboo, uh, tapa cloth ceiling, and Polynesian island murals on all the walls, but it's used as a storage room now. And for me, as a lover of intact tiki environments, I what can be done in terms of preservation if it's an apartment building? That's it. You have to find out the owners, but they don't want to know about this. What's your opinion?
You asking me?
Yeah, any one of you.
It's commercial buildings in general are extremely difficult because the owners think that any concept of preservation will impact their ability to modify or sell their buildings. And they just appreciate the design more for what it could do for them, in terms of getting customers. But after
Right.
that, they move on, and that's what's so hard about it. And of course, the ones that we still see are the ones that are preservation by neglect, where the property owners just said, "Well, let's
Right.
keep it like it is."
Yeah,
That's
it's
why,
just I look at this and it screams at me. This has to be preserved, but what can we do about it?
You got to
well,
organize the tenants and get them to talk to the property. Who knows?
but I think that's the importance of your research, just photographing, publishing, talking about these things, because these were, an extra expense to begin with. That wasn't just a regular apartment house. It had this volcanic mountain in the middle and the tikis. So why did they go to the extra effort to add those elements? Because
Right.
it created an environment that was going to be appealing and therefore sellable to renters. So I think that's an aspect of it that we can really use. These still have a purpose and an appeal to people who are going to buy the building or rent the apartments or
Yeah,
go to the restaurant or whatever.
yeah. And luckily, at the end of the show, we have a nice example of that with Pete's help of a building where we convinced the owner to keep the theme. Um, it's just, it's just so amazing to me. This space has been left intact since 1963. It's still there. What can we do to save it? Okay, so now we finally get to tiki architecture in Palm Springs. Um, all these design elements make us appreciate the remaining examples of Polynesian pop architecture in Palm Springs. Palm Springs is home to the most intact example of a tiki motel architecture in California, the Tropics Hotel. Its impressive porte cochere, similar to North New Guinea meeting houses, um, um, was the beginning, the flagship. The Palm Springs Tropics was the flagship of several Tropics motels that were built by developer Ken Kimes, many of them in desert cities like Indio and Blythe, and the Modesto one is not on this map, interestingly. Um, but here's the glorious A-frame entrance and one of the massive tikis that were carved by artist Ed Chrisman, who used the palm tree root ball as their hairdos. Chrisman not only carved 24 tikis for the Palm Springs location, but also all the tikis for the Blythe Tropics, for the Modesto Tropics Motel. And here's Pete showing his appreciation for an Ed Chrisman tiki at the Tropics Motel in Indio.
Look
This
at
is
look, I have all that hair.
yeah, it was a while ago, and
It was a
unfortunately,
while ago.
that tiki is not there anymore. But they still operate the original neon sign. I just photographed this not too long ago, so that's beautiful with the original Tropics font. Right behind the Tropics, or around the corner, actually, down the street, there was a smaller mom and pop hotel called the Tiki Spa, and it was still in good shape when I photographed the sign in 1996, together with the Soul Tiki and the series of A-frames with the outrigger beams sticking out. I just mentioned the outrigger beams. but it eventually met the fate of many motels built in the 1960s. Um, but directly behind the tropics is still there the Royal Hawaiian Estate condos, um, and advertised as Hawaii in Palm Springs upon their opening.
So, Sven,
Yeah.
what is this strange confabulation of, the South Seas, tropical wet, and the desert? How do those two things come together?
Um, Pete?
Well, it's Palm Springs is already a leisure resort, and because Polynesian Pop Tiki was already popular in the late 50s and into the 60s, why not transplant it over here? And you can grow palm trees and there's mountains behind it, and it's
There
fun.
was sand.
You have
There
sand,
was
right?
sand, and there were pools, not the ocean,
Right.
but there were
But
pools.
it's fun, and at that time, a lot of these were second homes or condos, which were second homes. So they wanted a festive environment, and why not? Why not Tiki?
Yeah, Palm Springs was a vacation land to begin with, and like I pointed out in the beginning, Hawaii and Polynesia was equated with going on vacation.
Also, people were having those backyard luau's throughout the whole period, out here
Right,
and everywhere else in the country.
right,
So it all kind of tied together.
Well, that's an important thing, I think. I mean, to a proper architectural historian, this may just seem silly uh, to put these two things together. But, whether it's a luau, people getting together in their backyard or going on vacation, or just having a sense of fantasy about or symbolism, fantasy may be just symbolism about something.
right,
This is kind of an underlying thing that I think your books are pointing out, that there are connections that architectural histories sometimes ignore, but that's why tiki in the desert is important.
right. And look how whimsical it got with the Royal Hawaiian. I mean, that's to me, that's the commercial version of Shin and Khan in a way. And luckily they're in their current renovated state of dynamic mid-century modernism. The Royal Hawaiian's A-frame are somewhat, though they're somewhat low in their height here and A-frame height. Their unique feature are these triangular patio dividers, and which remind me of the inverted triangle designs of one of Harry Gesner's buildings, because these, if you follow them down, it's like an upside down A-frame in a way. Luckily, they're not only being renovated in good shape, but they have been designated as a historic district.
To just to jump in here, one of the great things about Palm Springs is because people have been out here since the 90s in preserving mid-century modern. We've also been interested in things like Polynesian pop, and we've made a serious case, the preservation community, about why these properties are important. And so the
Right,
city this is a whole district, the whole complex of condominiums is a historic district, and they all can take advantage of the Mills Act for property tax reduction. So I think it's pretty remarkable. And there are others, which you'll talk about, Sven, that are Polynesian pop
right,
inspired in Palm Springs that are also designated as local landmarks.
yeah.
Interesting that this plaque says Polynesian inspired modernism as the style, because
That's a good description.
it is, because modernists in California, especially, did not reject history. They embraced history, including Polynesian indigenous architecture as well, and made great architecture of it.
Yeah, and I want to talk especially about these uh, patio dividers. Here it says the beam extensions of patios dubbed flying sevens. Now, I don't know. It's obvious where that came from, but I don't. I disagree. I see them as space age inspired, and their pointy shape reminds me of the tail fins of late 1950s American cars. If you look at the side of the building here, and this is the new 1960 Plymouth, I mean, those are tail. This is the only building I know of with tail fins. And uh, Alan, it's not the first time modernist architecture would have been inspired by automotive design, like this, known as now as the Astro Diner, used to be called Conrad's. And Alan, I love your story about how you first met or were shown this building.
This is the building that introduced me to Googie architecture, which I had no idea about. And we got a question also in the Q&A about the connection. So this was, I was at UCLA Architecture School on a bus tour of Silver Lake, where this stands. And we were looking at Richard Neutra and Rudolf Schindler houses and, all very distinguished architecture. And our professor, John Beach, said, "Oh, there's one of those populist modern coffee shops." And we all looked and we were all puzzled about why he would point that out, this particular Astro's restaurant. But it planted a seed in my mind, which definitely led to a lot of later research, because there is this underlying connection between the space age, modern architecture, modern technology, living in a paradise area, beautiful weather, and what the architecture might come from that.
But it also wasn't it also not kind of said in a throwaway form as compared to Schindler and Neutra. Oh, there's this coffee shop thing, and you saw it as something interesting, and you dug into it, and you with your research you created this whole new genre.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects of culture broadly, not just high art culture, but culture in general that Tiki and Googie all relate to, and which inspired these designers to, come up with these forms and so forth. So that's why it's important.
Yes. So let's talk about Palm Springs again. Charles Du Bois was a Southern California architect who was active in the desert also for the Alexander Construction Company, the largest residential developer in Palm Springs, which decided to jump on the Let's Go Hawaiian, Palm Springs Goes Hawaiian in the desert, with naming some of the homes they built in the Arabic neighborhood, Bali High and the Tiki, with very small A-frame gables, but still, they were advertising them at "Get the South Seas Feeling." Du Bois, who liked to vacation with his family in Hawaii, was hired by the Alexander also to design several homes for the Vista Las Palmas neighborhood, some of them as A-frames, of which 15 are still standing today. They're one of the great examples of, to me, of Polynesian A-frames still intact. Here's a happy family under a Du Bois A-frame, perhaps expecting Aloha Bob Payne, the Palm Springs broker from Hawaii for the Alexander Construction Company, who would give all the new owners, with giving them the keys to their home, he would present them with lace.
So explain the
Um,
confusion about Swiss Miss, because that's
yeah,
an important
we're, we're
thing
going
here.
to get
Yeah.
to that. It's one of my pet peeves, so I allotted its own little segment
Okay.
to
Okay.
it. First of all, to support my um, dictum of these being Polynesian themed, the Du Bois and Alexander are cooperated on another project, the Desert Lanai and Sunrise Lanai condominiums, which obviously already by the name speak of Hawaii. And they built these developments in 4 stages, and they're still standing today. It can be accessed through A-frame entrances, and ranging from with condos ranging from generous floor plans to these more modest A-frames. And if you're lucky, you get to go on one of their tours during Modernism Week, like last year.
And I'm happy to say that
Yeah.
I'm on the Historic Site Preservation Board here, and we recommended designation of that entire complex, and
Wow.
the city council granted it just last month.
Wow, yay.
Yeah.
Good news. Very good. So, talking about the Vista Las Palmas A-frame, there's this unfortunate misnomer which has befallen these Charles de Bois A-frames. And once the internet has taken a shining to a name, it becomes a self-perpetuating mantra, no
Yeah.
matter how right or wrong it may be. And so, uh, out out of a mix of ignorance and that kind of condescension for tiki style, somewhere the also cute term Swiss myths took hold for the Dubois Hawaiian houses. And if you look at these subtitles here, this is taken from when you put in Dubois or Swiss myths, it says A-frame roofs typify Swiss myth houses. Charles Dubois, Swiss Miss. It's stuck because it was such a buzzword, and it's still all over the internet, and it
Let's
drives me
move
nuts.
on.
Well, it
Next.
it probably was caused by the A-frame being best known as mountain vacation homes. And this is all started with Rudolf Schindler's 1934 Benati cabin in Lake Arrowhead, which eventually led to mountain lodges picking up the look as rustic modernism. That's your rendering there that you have, Pete.
Yes,
And
indeed.
Hyatt using the A-frame concept for their chalet motel chains, even down to, I love this lower one where the A-frame shape gets continued in the building paint. Um, but this is a Swiss chalet, replete with its typical gingerbread woodwork, and this would be its mid-century American version, for which the name Swiss Miss would be very appropriate. These houses are still numerous in Californian suburbs. They are also called Cinderella homes, named so by their original builder, Jean Woodruff. And these mid-century A-frames are wonderful, kitschy versions of the classic ranch house, the classic, Southern California form of living that Ellen knows a lot about. But why in hell would anybody insist on calling the Alexander A-frame Swiss Miss then, when the company built them them had Aloha Bob Payne present lace to lucky new owners? So enough on that. I'm done with that. I want to talk about a preservation success. My book of Tiki was published in September 2000, just in time for Pete Moruzzi to use it to demonstrate to the new owners of the Palm Springs Tropics Motel that they had a unique property on their hands, convincing them to not renovate it in generic Spanish colonial style as they were originally planning to do. That's the only thing that was left of that idea is the name nowadays is the Caliente Tropics. But so luckily today, the gas torches are still lighting some of the original at Christmas carved tikis. The reef bar is serving delectable tropical cocktails. And every year, tiki aficionados from all over the states and beyond gather under the A-frame to celebrate mid-century tiki culture in Palm Springs. Yes. So,
Hooray.
yeah, thank you, Pete. It was just a very, fortuitous moment that the book came out, and it now right away helped to preserve this this last
Yeah, well,
example of an A-frame motel.
I certainly wasn't shaking my finger at him at the time. I was more subtle, and I said, "Oh, I think you could actually do well and have a successful operation here if you didn't spend all the money turning it into something Spanish. Just take
Well,
advantage of its current
this is, I
design and
have to
just,
admit, this is a
fix it up."
reenactment of the moment.
I know it's a but
It's
I
not the
look
real
like a
moment.
stern taskmaster, which is not right.
No, no, you're just saying, look here, looky here.
Anyway, move on.
Yeah, that's it, guys.
Okay, good. Very good.
Well,
Excellent.
you make a great point, and why this sort of research is important. And I'd urge anybody in our audience, if they have a subject matter that has been under realized, under researched, go for it. Because once there's a book on one of these subjects, that's so powerful. The same thing happened with Googie
Absolutely.
architecture. When my
Right.
book came out, we've been able to save quite a number that otherwise would have disappeared. And these are parts of, culture that need to be recognized and continued.
In
Yeah.
fact, the Book of Tiki could be brought to any property owner, apartments or anything else that has a style and say, look, this has been very successful. And so anyway, so what I did here can certainly be done everywhere.
Yeah, because my books are all very visual, and your guys' books are also very visual, and that's important because people don't take the time to read necessarily. But if you can bring them the book and you open the pages and they see all these amazing images, that has that kind of wow, aha effect that makes them hopefully think twice.
Well, we have some questions in the Q&A that we want to try to get to some. And one which especially interests me is from Charles Smith. Was there any connection between the film industry, for example, King and I, South Pacific, and Hollywood stars getaways to the desert? And I know you cover this in your book. So what is the connection between Tiki and Hollywood?
Well, it again starts with Don the Beachcomber, who came back from his travels to Hawaii and the South Seas to Hollywood, and he brought back a whole slew of mementos, started renting them to the studios as props because it was at the same time that the studios were making South Seas movies. He even became an advisor to the South Seas movies. So then he used these props to decorate his first bar, and also he was one of the first that monetized celebrity culture. All these people, the actors from the studios, Marlene Dietrich, and so on, started coming to Don the Beachcomber, and that made him more and more famous, and made other people wanting to imitate what he was doing because it was, such a successful concept. And then, of course, also the fact that, you know, um, Southern California, especially Los Angeles, was home to a lot of tiki bars that could utilize set designers to help them build some of their buildings and interiors, especially. And it ended up to be like you felt like you were stepping into a South Seas movie because it was decorated like a film set.
And people were prepared to kind of understand what is that environment, what are the details, what are the materials, because they'd gone to the movies and they'd seen it in
Right.
the movies, and then here that was in real life as
Well,
well.
what it then helped were, of course, were the intoxicating cocktails and the, exotic music, and that sort of fused the whole illusion together into this uh, experience of being in the South Seas. Next
Okay,
question.
let's see. There's a question here about, well, mentioning a number of different places, because these are certainly all over California, but also all over the country. Michelle Madigan talks about the Shelter Island in San Diego as a wonderful collection of tiki architecture. Do you know, how did this spread? Why is it all over the place? Were the same architects doing it everywhere or what?
No, it wasn't the same architects, but like I said, the key economic factor was the statehood of Hawaii, and like Shelter Island is a great example because it's in itself an artificial island, and then it got picked to build this artificial Polynesia on it, and it started with a restaurant called the Bali High that was originally Christian's Hut, which goes all the way back to Catalina Island, where they filmed Mutiny on the Bounty. So it has this long procession and interestingly, also Bali High is, of course, based on another successful movie called South Pacific. It became a hit song. Everybody knew it. So the Bali High started the South Sea look for Shelter Island. And then I think the city actually approved the A-frame as the main architectural signifier for Shelter Island.
Hmm.
Yeah, amazing.
What there's also a question about the Tonga room in San Francisco's Fairmont Hotel, which had a special environmental effect of a cloudburst as well. Uh, how does that fit into this? Was it the same time? Was it earlier? Was it later?
It was kind of later, but it's a little bit more, even more complicated because it started out as the hotel swimming pool. Then it was converted into a steamship deck swimming pool with fake steamship decor around it. And in the 60s, it briefly went through a Chinese modern phase. And then not until the 70s did Oceanic Arts go in there and turn it into a completely, South Pacific Polynesian environment. But the reason for that was that some of the hotel owners, really rich people, were fans of Polynesian pop and tiki from the earlier generations, from when they had gone through the whole evolution, and they just they wanted to have that environment in their own business. So that's how the Tonga Room came to be, and it's still amazing that it's working in working condition with its showers emptying into the pool and a raft with a band on the pool gliding into the middle of the pool playing music and thunder and lightning effects. Again, all kind of like film special effects.
Applied to architecture, yes. And
Yeah.
again, not a silly thing. It's a very effective tool in the architect's toolbox. Um, there's a question here that interests me also from Mel McGowan. Any linkage between Hawaiian-based architects Pete Wimberly,
Hmm.
Oh,
who did
yes.
Cocoa Palms and the Waikikian and California Polynesian pop?
I'm glad that was brought up because I didn't, I had to pick and choose about what I put in my presentation. And Pete Wimmerly was definitely the most avant-garde artist in Hawaii that initiated, it was one of the initiators of the A-frame for Polynesian places. The Waikikian hyperbolic paraboloid is the best example. But before that, he built Canlis. The Canlis restaurant already was an A-frame, and then throughout his career, Wimberly built some A-frame homes for people in Hawaii. And yeah, he's an important factor in the A-frame evolution.
But he has no connection to California, right?
Well, these things he didn't build in California, but things like the Waikikian Hotel with this extreme hyperbolic parallel lobby, they got published in architecture magazines, and that's how architects got their ideas a lot and used those examples for their own work.
Well, one of the connections also is that working with Wimberly was the Los Angeles architect Richard Bradshaw. And he worked on that really extraordinary example, this wood structure
Yeah,
What was the name of that hotel?
Waikikian.
Waikikian.
Right.
It's such a dramatic example, but it did need a very good, very imaginative structural engineer. And I interviewed Richard Bradshaw, and there was a point when it was brand new, like he walked up on it and kind of
Yeah.
jumped up and down, and it did give way and was supposed to. He knew what he was doing. Um, but Richard Bradshaw worked on for a number of other great Los Angeles architects. He was the engineer, for example, on the theme building at LAX. Just
Oh, wow. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's one thing that's important to and Alan, you know more about is that a lot of these things wouldn't have been possible with the right engineers. I think, John Lautner is a perfect example. He was so free in his imagination, in his designs, but if he wouldn't have had the people that could build them, they would not have been built.
exactly. Well, we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but I have to ask you guys, because you're the experts, what are your absolute favorite go-to examples of Polynesian, Tiki, modern, whatever you want to call it? What would you recommend?
Well, I love the Royal Hawaiian Estates, and they have been open to tours and also events, parties during Modernism Week. So I always would partake in that if you're here in town for Modernism Week. But then here in Palm Springs, we're lucky enough to have three functioning tiki bars right now. Not only the Reef at the Tropics, but also the Tonga Hut on Palm Canyon. And then in the original down the Beachcomber building, there is now Bootlegger Tiki, which also serves some expert tropical concoctions.
For me, the loss of the Beverly Hills Trader Vic's was devastating because that's what we're so celebrate a lot of birthdays, and it was so convenient. It was so beautiful. Well, now that that's gone, I have to say the Mai Tai in Fort Lauderdale. It's the most elaborate of all the remaining, I'd say, Polynesian inspired restaurants with floor shows, and they have a big outdoor tropical garden that you can walk around. It has this huge A-frame entrance. I mean, it has everything you could ever want. It's been recently restored. Now, granted, it's in Florida, but to me,
Oh yeah,
it's amazing.
absolutely the most authentic and extensive what I call tiki temple still around today.
Oh, great. So we do have also a comment here from Jennifer Keel, who says that there is currently an exhibit by the Newport Beach Historical Society of an exhibit on tiki that they curated. You can go to newportbeachhistorical.org/tiki. And I
Oh,
live here in Orange County, so I'm going to have to go see it. I had not
yeah.
known about that.
I haven't heard about it either. I'm very curious. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for letting us know.
yeah, very good. Well, there's so much more to say. Thank you both for your work and your research, not only in research, but in activism, promoting, explaining to people why this is, because there's so many more cultural connections under the surface that your research brings out, but they're so important. They explain why our environment looks the way it does, but it also has a lot of lessons about what works, what appeals to people, and how can we use those to make a better built environment as well. So, do you have any last comments, or
I want to say just thank you for my friend Pete Moruzzi for helping and being instructive and writing and putting together the Palm Springs Tiki book, which I couldn't have done without him. And Palm Springs is our chosen retirement place, I would think. And I'm just very glad that we were able to publish this book last year. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Sven.
from Gibbs Smith Publishers? Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Sven and Pete, for your contribution. And we do have your book listed on our annual auction, so we encourage everybody to bid on it at californiapreservation.org/bid. You can also find it online, I'm sure. I think Pete and Sven, where's the best place to buy the book, you think?
Oh,
I would never say Amazon.
I would never say Amazon, but it is.
Any
Um,
independent bookseller
No,
that
you
has an
should go
online.
by your local bookseller. Yeah, definitely.
Great. And thank you, Alan, for your wonderful moderation. Hopefully, we'll have all three of you back at some point soon in another CPF program. With that, I'm going to close this out today, but I also wanted to remind everybody that this is part of a four-part series. We still have parts 3 and 4. Next Tuesday is Armenian Architecture and Heritage in California, next Tuesday at noon. And then next Thursday, we'll be looking at Danish culture and architecture in California in the city of Solvang. So we hope you'll join us for both of those, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, everybody.